team. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our discussion today, Ignite Change, Tobacco Control Efforts in the Caribbean. And I'm emphasizing discussion because we really do want to hear from you. The discussion will focus on the impact of new and emerging tobacco products on children and youth and tobacco control advocacy efforts. So this event is made to be a space for sharing of experiences and really what we're observing on the ground. And so please, we know that we have a number of participants joining us from across the region and beyond. So I am encouraging all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat. We're really, really pleased to have you. This event is in light of World No Tobacco Day, which is recognized on May 31st. The theme for this year was protecting children from tobacco industry interference. Very timely, given the tobacco industry's unrelentless goal to capture a new generation of users. And this campaign video by the World Health Organization says it all.
Hey, got some words of warning for you about a little industry called Big Tobacco. Why? Because they're targeting us. We've been through a lot, all kinds of climate crises, a global pandemic, and 3 economic recessions. That's wild. You know what else is wild? That while millions of people were losing their homes, lives, and livelihoods, someone else was making bank of all that suffering and misery. Big Tobacco. I'm a little heated, and you should be too. Here's the facts. Those sustainability cleanups don't even dent the pollution they cause. We are facing climate catastrophe. And here's Big Tobacco cutting down 600 million trees every year to grow the stuff that'll kill over 8 million people. Never mind the 84 million tons of CO2 emissions created to produce it. Oh, and Big Tobacco helping people, being responsible with how they source and sell their product. Why don't we check in with the farmers they've exploited, the minority groups they've targeted, the kids they're marketing to? Yeah, they're pushing this stuff to kids. You've heard of e-cigarettes, nicotine pouches, vapes with fruity new flavors. How about 5-year-olds heading to the ER because they got their hands on a vape at school? You think they care? I'll let them say it themselves. Smoking e-cigarettes is totally safe. The base of our business is the high school student. Young adult smokers are the only source of replacement smokers. We don't smoke that, we just sell it. We reserve the right to smoke for the young. We're done with the lies. We won't let them win. So you can leave this where it is, or you can step in, stand up, use your voice, and say no to Big Tobacco.
Such a powerful video. And if you have any particular reflections or if anything that was said in the video resonates or you're seeing locally, please feel free to use the chat and share with us. Very quickly, just to emphasize the objectives of this session, really to discuss the concerns with new and emerging tobacco products in the Caribbean and the impact on children and youth, explore strategies for Caribbean children and youth engagement in tobacco control advocacy, and highlight and amplify tobacco control advocacy efforts in the Caribbean. As I mentioned, everyone, this is a discussion-based session, so we really, really do want to hear from you. The session will be divided into 2 parts. The first part, recruiting new customers, regional tobacco industry efforts to create a new generation of young people. Right after we have a short presentation, we are going to have a discussion. And then session 2, mobilizing a new generation of advocates to tackle big tobacco. And again, we're gonna have a very brief presentation, but we really do want to hear from you what's been happening locally and also any suggestions that you have for growing a new generation of tobacco control advocates. And so very quickly, housekeeping, as I mentioned before, please feel free to add your comments and reflections in the chat. Very good morning to all of those who would have just joined us. We're also encouraging you to introduce yourselves in the chat. And during the discussion component, again, feel free to input your thoughts into the chat or to raise your hand, because we really do want to have a conversation with you. And so with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Barbara McGaw. She is the Tobacco Control Advisor at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, and has been leading tobacco control efforts for years in the region. And it has been a mentor to a lot of us who are in the tobacco control or new tobacco control advocates. Barbara, turning it over to you. Thank you so much. Barbara, I think you might be muted.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry, Barbara, I think you might be muted.
Okay. How does that sound good?
Sounds good. Go right ahead.
Perfect. Right. So thank you very much for asking me to open this session. Watching that video just ignited, as you said, some real anger and some real concern in me, and the effect of the tobacco control or the tobacco industry, on our youth. So you probably know World No Tobacco Day is often celebrated by highlighting the health risks associated with tobacco use, and of course, advocating for effective monitoring of the sale, distribution, consumption, and promotion of the products. The data is disturbing. Tobacco kills more than 8 million people, 7 million of which are due to tobacco use. And about 1.2 are due to non-smokers being exposed to secondhand smoke. So that's what the data is showing. This year's theme, Protecting Children from Tobacco Industry Interference, really is focusing on advocating for an end to the targeting of youth with harmful tobacco products. In my more than 15 years working in tobacco control advocacy, I've seen how the tobacco industry has manipulated the science and deployed their tactics in the Caribbean as they do around the world. They continue to undermine tobacco legislation using a number of tactics, and of course, recruiting new customers, especially young people, using many strategies, slick marketing, pricing, availability, sponsorship, and promotion. So with the emergence of the electronic nicotine devices or non-nicotine, because there are two types, the strategy has not changed, and the industry has prioritized the marketing and promotion of these addictive products, making vaping cool. And they continue to undermine policy and promote their products to children and young people. For somebody that's been working in this area for many years, I can tell you we need to act urgently to address this potential crisis. The use of e-cigarettes and their allies is a clear and present danger, and we see where the tobacco industry is putting their thrust into these options over traditional cigarettes to the detriment of our young people. You may even hear later to that in some countries, the e-cigarette rates of youth is higher than the traditional tobacco. Research has shown that the Caribbean has some of the highest rates of vaping among young people in all the Americas. We're a small region, so we have to work together to push for comprehensive tobacco control legislation to protect our young people. Today, we are bringing together key regional actors representing diverse stakeholders to discuss concerns with the new and emerging tobacco products in the Caribbean and the impact on children and youth. And as Daniel said, we look at policy and community-based solutions for Caribbean child and youth engagement in tobacco control advocacy with a view to building a base of tobacco control youth. The youth have to help the youth. We have to help and support the youth in helping us to clean out this scourge in terms of e-cigarette use. So I just want to thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I have so much respect for you and, again, your unrelenting efforts in tobacco control advocacy. And you left us with a number of thoughts to consider in terms of moving forward. And so we're really looking forward to the discussion. And one of the things that you emphasized at the end of your remarks, Barbara, are the focus that we need to have on informing youth and engaging youth and empowering youth. And Doral Quinton, who is our project assistant at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, you'll hear from her towards the end of the session. She is a tobacco control advocate, and she would have led our World No Tobacco Day efforts. She would have posted an article that she wrote in the chat. So please feel free to have a look at that and hear from her on her thoughts on what we need to do moving forward. And she would have also coordinated a video for World No Tobacco Day. And so Doral, going to invite you to play that video now.
Do you want to hear a shocking quote? In 1981, a researcher for Philip Morris once wrote, "Today's teenager is tomorrow's potential regular customer."
It seems like some things never change. In the Caribbean, the tobacco industry is targeting us with aggressive marketing, school sponsorships, carnival sponsorships, vape ads near schools.
They're hooking young people on nicotine, harming our health and future. They're promoting e-cigarettes as smoke-free, but don't be fooled. They're harmful too.
Let's stand up and say no to big tobacco's lies. We deserve a healthier future. We demand comprehensive smoke-free policies, fully implementing the FCTC, including strict regulations for e-cigarettes and any future emerging products.
Great. Thank you so much, Doral. And I know some of our youth advocates, our Healthy Caribbean youth members who are part of that video are on the call. So again, good morning to all. Feel free to those who just joined to introduce yourselves in the chat. We're so happy that you are here. And now we are heading straight into session 1, recruiting new customers, regional tobacco industry efforts to create a new generation of young people hooked on e-cigarettes. The Healthy Caribbean Coalition and partners would have launched a report on vaping. In 2023, it would have highlighted that within almost all countries that we have data for, e-cigarette use, as Barbara would have mentioned, is higher than tobacco use.
Good morning.
Good morning. What are these novel products? What are the global recommendations? And so we invite Cheryl Dennis Wright. She's an international consultant, health law and regulation from the Pan American Health Organization, and she's going to help us answer these questions and more. Cheryl?
Yes, good morning, good morning, good morning to all. We're really happy to have you here, and certainly Kaho is delighted to share and to be a part of the discussions. So I have a brief presentation which I will share. Let me just share my screen right now. Please let me know when you're able to see it.
Not just yet, Cheryl.
Okay. Seeing now?
Okay, it's coming up. Seeing it, and once you're in presentation mode, you're good to go.
Okay, let me put it in presentation mode. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, great. So let me just quickly run through. I think the presentations before actually helped to set the pace. And so, I'm sure that we all have an appreciation for the fact that, there are some great concerns in respect of these emerging tobacco products and how they impact youth. So let me just start at the beginning. And the beginning is that Caribbean states are signatories to the WHO FCTC. Now we know that when the FCTC was initially envisaged, perhaps vaping was not such a thing as it was now. And therefore, having also been a part of a number of these COP, Conference of the Parties to the FCTC meeting, we recognize that more and more in these discussions, vaping has now become a feature where, in fact, not just a feature, but a highlight where countries are asked to give account as to how they proceed and regulate these products. So as I said, we're starting at the beginning to look at the fact that CARICOM states are signatories to the WHO FCTC. In fact, many of them started from as early, in terms of signing, from as early as around 2004, as we are seeing on our slides here. Now, in putting in place obligations under the WHO FCTC, countries are also urged to take steps, to help them to properly and to effectively implement. And therefore, as a part of this global response, let me try to make, right. As a part of this global response, they're required to put in place all the steps that are required. Now, if tobacco had come about at the time, I believe there was a statement some time ago that it could have even easily been treated as a pandemic. Now, as I said, even as you have seen from the earlier slide, you would recognize that this was adopted unanimously at the 56th World Health Assembly. That was as far as 2003, and this treaty entered into force in 2005. So since the FCTC's international treaty, at that time, since it entered into force, many countries have in fact adopted legal measures. And we are seeing more and more that outside of these legal measures, there are also some regional commitments that countries are putting in place to ensure that they give effect to their international obligations under the treaty. I'm sharing with you some of CARICOM's commitments so that you understand that it's not just about our traditional tobacco products, but recognizing the harms that are associated with vaping. Countries more and more are also evaluating what their previous positions are and also what the effects are in respect of using these vape devices. So this slide really covers some of CARICOM's commitments, and you've seen that the most recent one is the 2023 Bridgetown Declaration on NCDs and Mental Health, where CARICOM countries and other SIDS have reaffirmed their commitment to take bold steps and bold actions to accelerate their progress in respect of NCDs and mental health. So zoning in on NCDs, we recognize the harm, not just in respect of children, even though that is our focus this morning, but generally, I won't go into all the statistics, but you would already have an appreciation of the fact that, NCDs represent, a major, it's a major cause for death and so on. And even in the region of the Caribbean, we have seen that especially tobacco smoking, tobacco use, the use of these vape devices, they can all be considered as a major risk factor. We've seen that there are some strategies, there are some tactics you've learned from the video just now. We will not be fooled. We're tired of the lies. However, bear in mind that the industry they are tactically very, very busy using corporate social responsibility to promote these very vape products. And as such, we have seen that they are not only promoting it to look responsible, but they are also promoting it for it to seem as though it is a harm reduction measure. And to borrow Barbara's words, to make it look as though it is cool. Bear in mind that CSR in general has been used as an effective political strategy by tobacco companies to build support for policy positions that favor the tobacco industry. And although we speak of the tobacco industry, bear in mind that it is the industry that is largely involved in promoting these vape products. In terms of their corporate social responsibility, we've also seen where these activities serve to facilitate access to policymakers. It enhances the company's reputation and so on. And these activities really challenge the bottom line of the FCTC, which is Article 5.3, which speaks about, the interference of government or public officials and the tobacco industry. And generally, even as we look at the use of vape and the harms on everyone, including children, when we think about these harms, we have to assess it in light of what the effects are and how in turn it burdens the health system. The economic burden, for instance, results in lack of productivity due to illnesses, and it definitely contributes to the cost to treat the various health conditions associated with the use and exposure of these products. So remember that even though the slide mentions tobacco use, we are speaking about tobacco use and exposure, and also within the context of the nicotine and how it generally affects the body and how it contributes to ill health. Now, again, we want to look at how the use of these products also contributes to the burden on the health system. And if we're looking at the burden on the health system and economic costs, it far outweighs any suggested value of scholarships. Let me zone in a little bit on regulating these products. So nicotine exposure during teenage years, for instance, can harm brain development, which continues until about age 25. In fact, it can impact learning, memory, and attention, and increase risk for future addiction to other drugs. We have seen where children, where young people, the earlier they start, instead of this being, as it's promoted, one of those gateways to assist persons in terms of quitting, we have seen that the effect is really to the contrary, where it acts as like a transition product. So young people who use e-cigarettes may be more likely to go on to use regular cigarettes, and then we get hooked right there. Therefore, it is incumbent on government, it is incumbent on state parties, it is incumbent on all of us to take steps as it relates to, the regulation of these products, bearing in mind that we are creating a new set of users. We've seen the industry really and truly recruiting new users by virtue of these products. In essence, what I'm saying is that we cannot regulate blindly. We cannot regulate just keeping in mind tobacco. We have to regulate bearing in mind e-cigarettes based on the role and the connection and the nexus between the use of e-cigarettes and other hard drugs and also regular cigarettes, which is the tobacco, linking us also to our obligations under the FCTC. So as it relates to some of these challenges, novel and emerging products that attract smokers are likely to attract non-users. Yes, youth are particularly attracted to new products, the gadgets and the technology, the new fads. As Barbara said, it appears to look cool, but really and truly the impact isn't. The young people are attracted to advertising and adult activities, and therefore the use of e-cigarette really mimics this. The characters, the flavors, and the colors that attract smokers are even more addictive and attractive to vulnerable youth. Addiction and dependence, independent of adverse health outcomes, will influence the lifetime success of young people. And public health authorities must therefore be vigilant in countering the aggressive tactics by the industry to market its products to youth, cleverly using the loopholes of existing legislation. Now, we're speaking about taking action based on the effect on youth. How do we take action? First of all, we go back to where we just started, bearing in mind the fact that we are parties to a framework convention on tobacco control, And we've seen also from the COP decisions that parties are encouraged to take steps that are in keeping with these decisions. And therefore, several countries have already banned the commercialization of novel and emerging tobacco and nicotine products. And some of the countries are listed there. Several countries have also, though not necessarily banning, have regulated novel and emerging products, meaning, enforcing bans regarding its use in indoor public places, banning advertising, which is very important, to ban advertising, promotion, and product and sponsorship, because in that way we tap in and we proactively and strategically counter the effects or really the strategies of the industry. For example, we have seen that Guyana has done this in respect of HTPs, which are heated tobacco products, and e-cigarettes, and also in the region we've seen Bolivia, though not a Caribbean country. We note that, the advertising strategies, again, are cool. Way back in the days, this shows, what the advertising look like. And then we are seeing the same strategies even today. Yes, but we have global responses. We have the Empower, we have banning commercialization that, these are steps that can be taken to really respond to the industry. And therefore, I just want to leave you with some key terms that you may want to consider in your own discussions. And even as some of you write papers and so on, and some of us are a part of the process where we seek to influence and assist countries with respect to putting in place strong and effective legislation. So these are some of the terms that you may want to consider. For instance, we know that the industry, they are getting, you know, they are very tactical, as we've said before, and as we have seen from the earlier videos, in terms of how they go about and market. And therefore, one of the strategies that they use is to also propose these model legislation to countries. These model legislations are often very weak and do not take adequate account of what the industry might plan to do. And therefore, it is important that as we look to regulate, we try to cover these devices effectively. One such strategy is to make sure that our definitions are, you know, are effective enough, are broad enough, and therefore we don't know what e-cigarettes will be called tomorrow. Therefore, it is important that we cover it as broad as possible. And one such proposal is to use broad definitions to cover electronic non-nicotine delivery systems. They may say, for instance, that this does not contain nicotine, or that their products do not contain nicotine. But bear in mind that even where they do not contain nicotine, they can very well contain other harmful substances. Yes, it's important that we look to defining nicotine device. You know, we can look at the fact that it's a device manufactured for consuming, you know, nicotine products by producing aerosol and so on. It's important that we look at defining nicotine products. And generally, some countries, for instance, Jamaica, has decided in their bill, which is public, to define this as a relevant product. So it's important that we do not make our definitions limiting. And I know that this is not a drafting class or a drafting exercise, but it's important seeing that all of us at some point along the line are important stakeholders in the process. And it's important that having this knowledge, we know what to look out for, even as the industry seeks to put in place you know, its own strategies and to also target our public officials. Tobacco devices, it's important that we look at that, and also that we look at tobacco products very broadly. So one important resource that I'd want to point you to is the resource that was produced by HCC in June 2023, just about a year ago, Vaping Among Adolescents and Youth in the Caribbean. It speaks of the general situation, it speaks of policy responses and the recommended actions. In fact, there is nothing new under the sun. And therefore, you know, once we can appreciate the recommendations, for instance, then what was recommended last year is still applicable today, and it's applicable for us as we go forward. I'm going to stop here. Bear in mind that we are available for continued discussion and engagement, and also for continued sharing of resources and research in this area. Thanks, Daniel. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cheryl. So many nuggets, and I know you will contribute to our conversation discussion that we're going to have now. So really appreciate some key ideas from me. Is a reminder to all of us on the call of CARICOM commitments and ongoing commitments to a smoke-free region. We would have seen from Cheryl's presentation where there are some countries that have implemented the regulations that we'd like to see, and there's some countries that haven't. Another thing that she pointed out is me thinking about the promotion strategies that the tobacco industry uses. Yes, they might say that they're promoting to tobacco users, but we all appreciate that all of those advertisements are consumed by non-users, including youth. And so it's so important that we have that comprehensive legislation on advertising, promotion, sponsorship. And for us to be forward thinking. So all of us who are advocating, and I know many of you are within the ministry, relevant ministries, and are contributing to policy development, being forward thinking in the definitions. As Cheryl said, we have no idea what tobacco products are going to look like in the next 10 years. And I understand that that has been a limitation and a challenge in some countries to regulate the products that we're talking about today, because they don't have those broad definitions in place. So just some things to think about. Would love to hear your reflections as well. And so now it is time to hear from you. We are heading into our discussion. And so to start our discussion, I really just wanted to show you this. So again, one of our limitations right now in the region is that we don't have enough data. We have some data, but not enough to really showcase what is happening on the ground. But just in case you haven't seen, you can have a quick look at where we are. So we have some countries here that you can see on the left, current use of e-cigarettes, and you can see kind of what that looks like in comparison to cigarette smoking. So although we have seen a decline in cigarette smoking, when you look at the numbers, for example, looking at Guyana, the total use of e-cigarettes versus cigarette smoking. So just wanted to show that image. And it is in the vaping report that Doriel would have shared the link to in the chat. All right, so heading to our questions. Some of you would have received the questions and maybe had some time to ponder and think about it. But we want to hear from you. What is the situation of e-cigarette use among youth in your country, and how is this shaped by the presence or absence of regulation? So feel free to type in the chat, feel free to raise your hand. We're really looking forward to hearing, because we can see the stats, but that really doesn't showcase exactly what we're seeing on the ground. Any immediate thoughts? I know we have a representation from across the region. Very interestingly, some representatives from the Ministry of Education. I've been having some conversations with some folks back home in Antigua and Barbuda, and they've been having some concerns around vape use in schools. So keen to hear if anyone is seeing anything on the ground in schools. I know we have some drug council representatives on the call. Would be good to hear what you are hearing and even the questions that you're hearing from youth. And then I know we have youth on the call, so it'd be good to hear and get a sense of what you're seeing. We have Dr. LeBlanc from Trinidad and Tobago. Right ahead.
Hi, morning, everybody. Thanks so much. Really and truly in Trinidad and Tobago, well, you saw it on your table, and it's the reality. It's a stark reality of us in Trinidad and Tobago. Unfortunately, the vapes have taken the forms of highlighters, of pens. The situation is dire to my mind as a parent and as a practitioner, a healthcare worker and an advocate, simply because our youth are not getting good examples. So this is not only them making a poor decision, this is also us as adults not having done enough to protect them. So it's really a sad situation, but I don't think it's a hopeless one, because we just need to empower and educate continuously and be persistent, because when they understand and if you look at the youth today, they're very switched on. So when you look at that, if you give them the facts and you give them the information, and if we also holistically create an environment, because it's not only about the vapes, it's about other factors, then I do think we can overcome it. But the situation in Trinidad and Tobago currently is that we're seeing much too much vapes, because as the former speaker said, the previous speaker said, the companies have basically marketed to the youth claiming it's a safe use of non-nicotine products. When it has nicotine, it can't kill you, it's a safe this, and the word safe has been continuously used, and the allowing it to be used in terms of radio advertising has now got circumvented the fact that we had the Tobacco Control Act saying we should not advertise to the youth about nicotine. So this is a problem, and that's where we have to revamp the legislation and think outside of the box in terms of what we include in legislation.
Thank you, Dr. LeBlanc. And I don't know if that resonates with anyone else on the call in terms of what we're seeing these vapes actually looking like in society, how accessible they are, how they are marketing. So Dr. LeBlanc is kind of heading into our second question, which everyone feel free to kind of hop between the questions in terms of what you are seeing. So we're hearing the radio advertisements. I know Dr. Blanc, we would have heard, we would have chatted about, and in Jamaica as well, the use, how we saw tobacco industry appearing in our culture, in Carnival, over the last couple of months as well, is particularly concerning. So yeah, I don't know if anyone, I know we have St. Lucia on the call, Antigua on the call. I think I might have seen St. Vincent. Natalia, yes, please go right ahead.
Yes, so I am a youth advocate from Jamaica, and what I see to be the case is where it's emerging in many of the youth spaces, particularly in school spaces. So, high schools and colleges. because it is being marketed as a safer alternative to using other products. So I see the case where there are, aside from the primary retailers themselves, there are also resellers who will import a lot of these vapes or source them and then sell them to minors or students. So there are actively like maybe over 50 social media pages of just small resellers who target these school students and will sell products to them so that they're able to use it as a form of stress relief or recreation. And I think another thing that really affects the student population is when some of these big tobacco companies also sponsor students via scholarships. So that is a huge thing that is seen here. So I think it's just becoming a cultural norm. There isn't really any regulation. So we have problems with them just vaping, and also yeah, we have the influence of these organizations sponsoring scholarships.
Thank you so much, Natalia, for sharing and hearing directly from the youth, like where you're seeing it. Natalia, can I ask you a question about how schools have been navigating this, just from your observation?
Right. So while many of the schools try their best to put a stop to it, so I know that, for example, many guidance counselors will have talks with school admin and try their best to crack down on it by, for example, having grade supervisors do checks throughout the school day. So they would just like walk around the block, confiscate certain items that students are not supposed to have. But I definitely think it's to a point where students have just gotten sneakier. So, for example, they will take bathroom breaks and they'll vape in the bathroom. So, I do feel like as much as the schools are trying to put in efforts to prevent the use of vapes on the compound, students are finding workarounds, and there are also after school social events where they partake in those practices. So I think there is some things being done, but I definitely think students are finding workarounds.
Thanks, Natalia. I think that goes back to the point that you made, that these devices are being promoted as safer alternatives. And so students are also using it kind of with that background information. And again, points to the need for this comprehensive legislation in order to kind of back up what's happening in the schools. And I just wanted to point out really quickly before I go to Dr. LeBlanc, your point on the retailers, resellers, and something that we've also heard of is the delivery service platforms, which we know to be used for food, have also been used for delivery of these devices as well. Thank you so much, Natalia, for sharing. Dr. LeBlanc?
I think I appreciate what Natalia said, and I just wanted to find out if she could just briefly say, for example, if I gave her like one line to give us as a youth advocate, what more could you say we could do at this point for the young people, or how do her peers feel about it? You understand that kind of thing? So we get feedback from them versus us saying, here, we're empowering you, advocate the hell out of this. You understand? So can you tell us if there's something that we're missing in terms of getting to the information out there?
To be honest, I am a firm believer in policy. So I believe that, young people are that, especially the younger ones in high school, they are much more prone to being influenced. So they should just not be able to access these things, period, from a policy perspective. But I'm a firm believer in what we can do as organizations is just educate. So I definitely think more can be done to help young persons make informed decisions. And I'm also a firm believer in not just saying these substances are bad for you, but for also looking more into why young persons resort to using these substances and providing healthier or safer alternative coping.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Dr. Blanc, we have a lot to work on. But Natalia, on your final point, I would have been listening into the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors would have had an event on World No Tobacco Day, and that very same point on the why they're using these substances came up. And important for us to really, as we're continuing to advocate, but also continue to give thought to the why young people are turning towards these substances. I'm just seeing in the chat from Cayman Islands, seeing quite an increase in the advertisements and selling of vapes on social media. There's been a big emphasis on new flavors, which have sometimes utilized language to appeal to youth, blue, riz, raspberry. There's also been an emphasis placed in the unique features of these devices, including smart screens and the ability to customize those screens with animation. So in some of these cases, we've also seen giveaways being advertised online as well. Thank you so much for sharing, Layla. And again, everyone, we're very interested in hearing what's happening locally, but also if what someone has said resonates. We just welcome your reflections and keen to know if we're seeing these trends across the region. So on that point that Layla brought up, Doriel, I know you would have had a conversation with young people last year ahead of us releasing the vaping report on kind of some of the whys or kind of some of the reasons why they're attracted to using vapes. I don't know if you'd like to share anything. I'm sure share some of the thoughts from the young people that you spoke with.
Sure, Danielle. So with my conversations with peers, it's quite easy to see like why young people are attracted to cigarettes. And the tobacco industry knows this. They're very trendy packaging, and the vapes come in so many different packages. Sometimes they look like pens, highlighters, like Asante said. There's some that look like speakers. And they're so easy for children to, put in their pockets, take to school, and even like get past like teachers or administrators might not even know what they are until they start puffing. And you see all these different flavors. The FDA said that there's over 15,000, 16,000 flavors. And as Layla said, they use this language, blue riz raspberry. So they're capitalizing on the trendy language that youth are using because they know that their profits depend on having a replacement source of smokers and nicotine users and vape users. They know that the youth are the primary target, and they're always directing their marketing towards youth. It's basically just a strategy. They're also really using influencers at different events to promote their products. They use especially young, attractive women, young, attractive men, making it seem very cool and trendy. And if you want to get in on this, use a vape, use this electronic device. And we're seeing that all over the Caribbean. In Carnival, we're seeing it at events for crop over, parties, billboards, we're seeing it everywhere.
Thanks, Doriel. So really kind of tapping into the how that they're marketing and kind of, again, adding on to what Natalia would have shared as well. So some things that we need to continue to stay on a lookout for. And as a lot of us are in the rooms with policymakers, some things that we need to continue to highlight. Natalia, they also market heavily to youth, recreation, and party spaces, absolutely, suggesting that a good time results from the use of these substances. You're spot on, Natalia, and I think we really saw that over the space of Carnival in both Trinidad and Jamaica. And I know we have an upcoming Carnival season over the next few months. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well. And a lot of you have mentioned social media. And we do know that even just being on social media, the WHO report that would have come out just a week ago would have highlighted that just being on social media, there's an increase in risk of current e-cigarette use. Each additional hour per day spent on the platform amongst first-year university students was associated with a 4.6% increase in the probability of lifetime e-cigarette use. So just thinking about what Doriel said about the influencers, what we're seeing, what Layla would have said as well, something that we need to be mindful of. We know that that space is difficult to manage, but it's something that we as advocates need to continue to be on the lookout for.
Sorry, Danielle, if I may,
Yeah,
I
sure,
was trying to
please.
raise my hand, but I'm not.
Oh,
I've been
please,
searching for the
please.
raise hand feature.
Go
Right.
ahead.
So if I may, just to quickly also mention that the messaging of the tobacco industry really has not necessarily changed. There has been a little variation, but we've moved from the fact that, you know, they've always been saying, you know, we're transforming our product, we're a part of the solution. That is why you have the corporate social responsibility. They sometimes seek to partner and say, okay, we have a better way to accelerate global progress and to combat the tobacco epidemic. They have been giving messages that they care about consumers and children, and they want to give people safer choices. And that is why in the not so distant past, we had the emergence of the smokeless tobacco products. Yes, where they're saying they are leading the way to a smoke-free future. And now we're at a situation where we have the vaping products. So we have the same industry speaking about you know, smokeless, a smoke-free future. They're talking about safer choices, but at the same time, we have seen that kind of message looking as though it has been transforming, but it's really the same message. And what certainly remains constant, or what has certainly increased, is their profits. Yes. So even in my preparation for this morning, I came upon some information from a particular source, which for instance showed that in terms of their profits, we have seen an overall US 785.6 billion, and that takes into account the traditional cigarettes, moving from the smoking tobacco in the various ways that they have proposed it. Then we have cigars, and they have moved to smokeless tobacco and the vapor products, all of them coming and being classified under the one tobacco industry. So no matter how they package it, the message is the same, the profit is higher, and essentially we have the health effects remaining constant. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for that. And there are numerous comments in the chat. Valerie was speaking to kind of what we're going to discuss in our second segment, is doing more to understand why they are engaging in these practices so we can be able to work with young people. Dr. LeBlanc making a comment about the smokeless environment. And so advocates have also been kind of moving towards, if I'm correct, specifying nicotine-free future. Dr. Singh making a comment about the T20 cricket season. So there are lots of opportunities, which again is the reason why we need to be, we need to have these policies, regulations in place. Okay, I have gone over time, but I do want to kind of start touching on question 3. We already started 2, but invite Dr. LeBlanc very briefly to share about how the CSOs are responding to this issue. And everyone, please feel free to also share your reflections in the chat. Dr. LeBlanc and the Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society for years now have been unrelentless in their advocacy, and especially around this vaping issue. So I will turn it over to her to speak briefly, and perhaps we might have time to show her recent campaign video.
Hi, morning, everybody. Thanks for having us as usual. The Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society has been fighting and continues to fight against all nicotine products. You know, what we found is what we've all echoed. We've seen how the tobacco industry has manipulated or trying to manipulate, and in some cases successfully manipulated our youth. But we continue to persevere because number one, we know we can't give up hope, right? That's important. Number two, if we continuously educate not only the youth, but also the adults, but we have to focus on the youth because they are the future leaders of tomorrow, then we have to hit from the consumer aspect alone and also the policy aspect. And therefore, we in collaboration with the Scotiabank Foundation, came up with the No Smoking, No Vaping campaign. And we're happy for y'all to use our material. We're happy to share it. We're happy to make this viral. But what this campaign is about is empowering the young people, the Gen Zs, the Gen whatever, because I fall off of whatever they are now, but I'm learning their lingo slowly because I have young ones that are Gen Zs, they tell me. But speak to them, not down to them, speak to and with them, understand them. And so, you know, as the youth advocate, I forgot her name because I'm getting older, as she said, we have to also look not only at policy, but why are they going towards this? You understand? And because we have come out, we notice we've all come out of the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of the acute phase. And that led us to a very fight or flight response, where some said, thank God I'm alive. So what happens now? Let me just do it. We have crime on the rise in all of our regions, in all our countries of the region. Increase so much stress, so to speak, both, and we talk about mental health. Mental health is like a fad word now, but nobody really deals with mental health because it's not something tangible to them. So all of these factors, holistically, we have to treat with this. We have to get better food because the chemicals in the food affect their brain chemistry. We have to get better environments. We have to walk the walk. And that's where the Cancer Society is hoping we can all come together and continuously press on our policymakers that go to the COP meetings, that go to the FCTC meetings, that go to all the meetings, that go to the CARICOM meetings. Let them not only talk a talk, but walk the walk. Because let us show them, they have the evidence. What is a smokeless environment? Come on now. You're blowing out and you're looking like a dragon with a vape. How is that smokeless? You understand? So we have to really hit home, and that's what we at the Cancer Society in Trinidad and Tobago have decided to do and continue to do. And we hope we can join with y'all. And we strongly believe that it's not about speaking down to the youth, it's speaking with them, parlaying with them. We are right now going into the high schools, like I'm due to go this afternoon. We have skits. We say, tell us what you think. And I'm telling you, it's amazing. They come at us at the beginning, but miss, this is safe. Miss, that is safe. And at the end of that meeting, and you know, the youth ain't telling you nothing to make you feel good. So they're at the end of the meeting, they're coming to you and saying, you know, I really need to go home and think about this. Or I'm going to tell my elder ones in the household and my peers, most importantly, about this. So if we get one or two stopping vaping, we've done well. And that's what we have to do, continuously persevere. So I hope you enjoy our campaign, our videos. If you can't see them now, feel free to follow us on social media, but let's join together and not give up on this.
Thank you, Dr. LeBlanc. Doriel, I think we need to show the video. I think we need to show the video after hearing from Dr. LeBlanc. Do we have it available?
Yep, we do. Let me share.
Let's talk about this silly fascination with the vape cloud. It's so crazy that we know that behind those puffs lies a dangerous game with your heart. Vaping isn't about the tricks, nor the flavors. It's about the dangerous impact it has on your body. And with each deadly puff, you increase your risk of a heart attack or stroke. Now, why would anyone take that risk just to fit in? Don't follow the cloud, lead the crowd. A message from the Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society and the Scotiabank Foundation.
We also have a second one since they're pretty brief.
Thank you.
Ever wonder what vaping does to your brain? It's more than just blowing smoke. Nicotine exposure during your crucial adolescent years can wreak havoc on your brain's development. Think about it. Every puff you take is a step backward. Your brain, the powerhouse of your potential, deserves better than to be clouded by harmful chemicals, and your future is too bright to be dimmed by clouds of vapor. Don't follow the cloud, lead the crowd. A message from the Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society and the Scotiabank Foundation.
Thank you, Doriel, and thank you, Dr. LeBlanc, for sharing. And again, I think it's so powerful to have this campaign, which I know is across platforms, but also what you mentioned about going into the schools, having that conversation with the students, having them tell you their thoughts. And not talking to them and talking with them. So really appreciate that and that direction. And that takes us right into our second session, which is all about mobilizing a new generation of advocates. And we've already started to hear a lot of what you all think that should look like and what we should be doing. So I am going to just speak very briefly. I had the opportunity to attend the Johns Hopkins Tobacco Control Leadership Program in February. And it was really an opportunity to learn more about different strategies in driving policy and change and empowering people and communities to do the same. There was an emphasis on centering our efforts on a rights-based approach, because this is a rights-based issue, and the sustainable development goals. So really trying our best to link all of our advocacy efforts together. And one of the things that I learned during this meeting is about an organization called CREA. For those of you who have Instagram, I highly recommend that you go and check them out. Dorial is going to chat a bit more about them. They are a youth organization based in Latin America, and a big focus of their work right now is on tobacco control. Their work is in Spanish, but their passion for this area is really inspiring. And so that's one of my main takeaways, is the need for us to also collaborate with our Latin American regions on this issue. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dorial, and Dorial, you can just tell me when to skip, and you can share a bit more about your experience.
Sure. So I had the privilege of representing CARICOM at the Youth Ambassador Summit hosted by Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and CREA. This was held in Lima, Peru in April, and it brought together participants from 17 different countries, and we focused on leadership in tobacco control and advocacy skills, and planning and executing successful policy campaigns. And each country had the opportunity to share what they were seeing in their specific countries with respect to the numerous tactics used by the tobacco industry to increase their consumer base and to interfere with public health policy making. And we all saw very similar tactics being used across all the countries, basically the same marketing tactics targeting youth. And we were able to look at ways to counter these tactics and develop a policy roadmap. And a very memorable moment was our visit to the Congress of the Republic of Peru, hosted by the former president of the Congress, Lady Soriano, where we advocated and we lobbied for a draft tobacco bill that would more comprehensively implement the FCTC in Peru and protect youth from current and future tobacco products, including the ENNDS, the non-nicotine and the nicotine delivery systems. And it was very empowering not only seeing my Latin American peers sitting face to face with the policymakers, but also having the opportunity to advocate myself. And this experience, it really reinforced the importance of youth involvement in policy discussions and underscored the impact that we can have when we actively engage in advocacy efforts. And I really hope that we can ignite a similar passion and energy here in the Caribbean. So we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, we wanted to introduce some of the resources developed by HCC and HCY. We have the Youth Tobacco Advocacy Control Portal, designed for and by youth advocates, providing information on tobacco use among youth, tobacco control policies, and advocacy resources. Let's go to the next slide, please. Control policies and resources. Yep. And last year, HCC also published Vaping Among Adolescents and Youth in the Caribbean, Situation, Policy Responses, and Recommended Actions. And you can also find a series of reports titled Towards a 100% Smoke-Free Caribbean, which addresses various sectors, including the blue economy, education, finance, and tourism. And on the next slide, you would also see case studies of the implementation of WHO FCTC in St. Lucia and Antigua and Barbuda. And all of these resources you can find on HCC's websites. The links are also in the concept note that was shared before, but we can also pop them in the chat as well. So now I'm gonna turn back over to Danielle. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dorial. And a key thing here is, and I mentioned it in a webinar on Monday, is providing those leadership opportunities, providing those capacity building opportunities for youth to grow and learn and advocate in this area is really important. And so I know we are crunched for time, but we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on these two questions. Can you share examples of current tobacco control advocacy efforts that engage children and youth in your country? We would have seen one from Dr. LeBlanc. And how might we collaborate to engage children and youth meaningfully in this area? So far, we've heard about the need to speak with young people to really get an understanding of the root causes behind their use. And so because we're quite short on time, I'm inviting and opening up the floor for any further thoughts on both of these questions.
Danielle, summertime is coming. So I really think that we need to think outside of the box and, you know, do things for them to be to promote them, because we know everybody's on social media. And yes, we would like them to have less screen time, but our reality is, look at us, we're always on the screen. So, you know, doing different things like engaging the youth, it's a little short now, but maybe you can think for next year or even for Christmas time, how we across the Caribbean have different competitions, different, you know, let's go back culturally as well. You know what I mean? Skits, let's go back to our culture and let us and engage the children a little more. So I really think we have to just make things fun, you know? And when you throw a party, for example, any party promoters that are on here now, throw a party that has absolutely no vape. You understand? And but make it fun. You understand? Commit, let our artists commit, let our cricketers commit. For example, our Global Relay for Life is coming up, and I mean, all our events are smokeless and alcohol free. So, but we still have fun. So we have to think outside the box. We have to get more funding for sure, and we have to just keep knocking on those doors and make sure that we can fight fire with fire. But we have to go back and make it fun for them as well, you know?
Thank you. And I think we have a lot to learn just from your interventions in schools. I know you would have mentioned skits and things. So I think maybe we could create another space to get a better understanding of how that's worked. And Natalia, go right ahead.
Right. So here in Jamaica, our drug council collaborates with the Ministry of Health and Wellness to do a campaign that it targets high schoolers. I believe, I'm not sure if they've expanded to tertiary, but I think they prioritize high school environments, and it's called Drug-Free Lifestyle Trending. So I know that over the period of the last semester or term for them, there were a lot of school visits, and I think they had a partnership with a radio station to do a school tour where they really focused on edutainment. So they toured these high schools, had fun activities, displays, very colorful, to help persons just learn more about their bodies, as well as the effects that these substances have on their development. So I had the chance to go to one of the schools on the tour, and it was just very engaging. So they definitely made it for youth, utilized a lot of activities, dance breaks, to just get the point across. And they also provide materials in the form of brochures and pamphlets. And I think they follow up the campaign with some online materials as well.
Thanks so much for sharing, Natalia. Just to say before I forget that I know we have some drug council reps on the call, and just to give you all kudos, I know there's some really great work being led by, oftentimes largely by you. So giving you your kudos, and feel free to share in the chat. And Natalia, and from Dr. LeBlanc and Natalia, so far I'm hearing words fun, engaging, creative, and thinking outside of the box. So I think that's something that we can all walk away with so far. Do we have any other areas or activities to share? And also, I would love to hear your thoughts, because we hear tobacco, But I think just from the conversation, we know that this is not just a tobacco control issue. This is an environmental issue. It's a mental health issue. Both of those are priority policies for a lot of our young people. So I wonder if maybe that's something that we use to engage them in this conversation. Maybe those are two things that we use when we're educating and empowering and having conversations with young people. We bring in those issues on mental health and bring in those issues on environment and climate change, because they're all very much related. Do we have any other suggestions for how we might engage youth / what you all are doing on the ground, just so that we can have some shared experiences? Or anything that you've seen
Yes.
other people do? Oh, yeah, sure.
Sorry, if I, right, just to chime in, sometimes I think as well, youth underestimate their power and impact, and also some of the opportunities. They may not very well be aware of some of the opportunities to influence change from the legislative or the policy standpoint. But I just want to reiterate the fact that, it's important. Advocacy is good. It does make a big difference. You may think it doesn't, but um, from a policy standpoint, from my experience seeing legislation being considered in Parliament and the weight that is given to what some might call the noise, it's not the noise. There is actual weight that is given to the voice of persons who are advocating. And so outside of your advocacy spaces, there is often opportunity, whether it is through your various groups. I know, for instance, that you have, for instance, the Office of the Public Defender. You have different offices with different mandates. The public defender might not be a good example in this situation, but there are different avenues that you can get involved to look at policy and to give your voice on policy. Oftentimes, there are some provisions and bills that are put out there for public comment. Get online, get on your parliamentary online systems, look what is there for public comment and make your voice heard in terms of not just definitions, but how it is that you're going to be governed later by a bill or by an act that is under consideration. So I just wanted to make that clear. And oftentimes these decisions in Parliament are public. Get online, let your voice be heard, and ask for an opportunity to give your input.
Thank you, Cheryl, for reminding us that advocacy does make a big difference, and that there are these opportunities for youth to be more deeply engaged, not just in the education component, but in the actual advocacy and in the policy-making process. So I'd encourage the youth. I know Natalia would have mentioned she's already engaged with different organizations on the ground, encouraging other youth on the call to do the same. And Natalia, you have your hand raised. Go right ahead.
Right. I think another area we can tap into is actually meeting the youth where they are. So I know that when it comes to collaboration, I haven't really seen as many youth organizations here actually directly reaching out to some of these youth clubs, these school clubs, extracurriculars, especially as it relates to some health-based ones, for example, sports or maybe lifestyle clubs, to collaborate with them to, come in, talk about these issues, kind of destigmatize the conversations, educate them, and also equip them with the tools and resources that they need as young persons to just go out into their wider classrooms and school space, or even their communities, and share what they've learned. Because I know a lot of persons, they're involved in things such as sports. I know here we're very heavily involved in football, track, cricket. So just getting them to also maybe champion a message in those capacities, being like, prioritize health. These are healthier alternatives to cope with certain issues. I think that would be very beneficial.
I think we'd all agree with you, Natalia. Very strong point to end on in terms of reaching the youth where they are. And again, that conversation that CARFA would have held, sorry, the CARICOM youth ambassadors would have held on Friday, very same sentiment coming from them as well. And even in our different advocacy campaigns, using language that resonates with youth. And one of the ways that we will understand what that language looks like is actually by engaging youth when we're developing the various campaigns and tools that we're aiming to equip them with, as Natalia mentioned. There are numerous resources in the chat. Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing. Do we have any other comments before we close? This has all been very, very valuable. Okay, and we will make a list of these recommendations and thoughts because I think it's something that all of us on the call and those others who registered who weren't able to attend can use in our ongoing efforts. So thank you all so much for your contributions, for your passion, for your interest in this area. To close, I'm going to turn over to Maisha Hudson, who's our Executive Director, to give her final reflections and thoughts on next steps. Maisha?
Thank you, Danielle. I wanted to echo your thanks to everyone who took time out of their morning to attend, especially on short notice. It was really important for us to do something for World No Tobacco Day, especially around this theme of youth, given that we have this really blossoming youth arm led by Danielle. So thanks to all of you who joined, and thanks to the presenters. Cheryl, thank you so much, as usual, for your tremendous contributions. Thank you, Danielle. You did an amazing job moderating. In closing, I wanted to point to a few things that struck out to me. One was, this need for data and the data gaps that we have, and data which is not only data driven by youth as well, collected by youth. And it occurred to me, we really do need to kind of encourage our master's level programs to start to do the type of research we've been talking about. And also, this commitment that we know CARICOM governments have made commitments. We had a commitment to be smoke-free by 2022. And as we look towards the UN high-level meeting in 2025, we have a really unique opportunity to remind our governments of these commitments and kind of building on the urgency that Barbara spoke about and the urgency that you've all echoed throughout this call, so that we need to start moving towards implementing those, the FCTC, ensuring that these new products are included. And when we think about the policies and programs we're looking at, how do we carve out those linkages with mental health and with climate change so that we can increase the kind of double duty impact of these policies and gather a kind of groundswell of support around them. And then engagement of youth, something that came up over and over, and that's something that we're committed to at the HCC. How do we make sure everything we do is youth-informed, youth-led, youth-driven? And then one really, important thing that's come to mind for me with Sante LeBlanc and the Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society is this idea of collaboration and partnership. We're in a small setting. We really need to build on those partnerships and collaboration, and to see Scotiabank partnering yet again this year, Dr. LeBlanc, around this campaign, really signaling this is a priority for them. And that's a private sector organization. It's a really powerful, powerful message. And so on this kind of idea of partnerships and collaboration and leveraging the power of all these different groups, it's a lovely way to end in the sense that we are really trying to build or rebuild a network that Barbara would have started, decades ago now, Barbara. I mean, you've been in this for so long, and we're really trying to rebuild a network around this issue so that we can start to provide the support needed by the likes of all of the tobacco focal points and the ministries across the region who are trying to implement this legislation, and very often, more often than not, need the support of the community to create that space in which they can power through industry opposition and implement the legislation that we know needs to be implemented. So with that, I'd like to thank you all again, and we encourage you to join our network. I think as we close, Danielle and Doriel, there'll be kind of a post-meeting questionnaire that will ask you if you're interested in joining the network, and we will be in touch. And thanks again for joining. We are all delighted at HCC and the wider family that you joined us today, and we look forward to working with you as we seek to elevate this issue on the regional agenda.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.